Hi everyone! So Windforce has received a pretty major buff in Season 5 and I've tried it out on the PTR. This is probably the item I have gotten the most questions about in the history of Diablo 4 so far, especially in the earlier seasons, until people learned that it was kind of bad. But, well, we have another update to it and this looks like this now. So it is now a barrage only bow. That's kind of what it did before. However, it has no more lucky hit chance. Instead, it has a flat chance to trigger, produces knockback or knockdown, and deal double damage. On top of this, it has a bunch of stats. This were not really changed. I think they upped them a little bit, so the passives were a little bit higher and stuff like that. But this is the item we got now. So if that is a supposed rework to make Windforce more viable, then I have to say straight up, that ain't it, to be honest. And I will explain why. Now, the thing about Windforce is that it has kind of this, old school attachment, the nostalgia with, for example, in Diablo 2, it was already present, and then back in Diablo 3 as well. In Diablo 3, it was never really useful, but it also did have this knockback effect. And now in Diablo 4, we still have the Windforce, and it kind of goes with the old theme of knocking back enemies. So I kind of appreciate that Blizzard is trying to stick to the theme here and try to make something a bit more unique and special that would apply to the rogues. However, yeah, I think the rework is not really hitting the mark here. I've been a proponent of removing the lucky hit requirement for basically ever, because the problem with the lucky hit of this item was that all the different, like especially range skills on the rogues, have very different lucky hit values. Penshot has by far the most. It starts at 50, it goes up to 80 or even 90 base lucky hit when you have combo points. And for example, rapid fire and barrage, they have like 20% or 16%. So this was kind of the same problem that Victimize was suffering from until, well, basically now actually anyway, that you first have the lucky hit, and then you have the damage auto skill that is scaling the item in two separate ways, basically, when it should only be one. So removing the lucky hit chance from it would make it kind of equal for all of the different skills. But on top of this, Blizzard has also made it a barrage only item. You cannot actually use Windforce anymore when you are playing rapid fire or penshot. So it's kind of like in a really weird spot now where I think barrage, at the very least, is probably the wrong choice here to make this item, at least with how it's usually played. Because if you look at this here, the way that barrage is usually played is that it's like a very close range build. And here you have the option to kind of like spray and pray into a pack basically and watch your arrows fly and like decimate all the little stuff. But at least when you go to kind of like more higher end content, you see this here, stuff lives long enough for you to actually like position yourself and then shotgun into the target. This is what you're trying to do, as you can see here. You try to position yourself right in front, potentially with, for example, Ghost Walker or Blade Shift, even inside the monster, so that you make sure that all of the arrows actually hit the target. Because the further you are away, the more arrows you will miss and the less damage you'll do. And what you see here is, well, whenever I shoot at enemies like that, sometimes they get knocked back more and more. We just saw this in action here on this elite previously, where I shoot at them and then they slowly get pushed away from me. And it's just kind of like here, like, I have to reposition myself all the time and I have to get closer again. And while I'm pushing the enemy, I lose damage because these arrows fly past them. You see this here? You shoot and there's just like arrows flying past left and right because it is further away from my character now. And this is kind of like a major problem that Barrage is generally trying to solve, really. Now, I can see that Windforce may not be intended as like a high-end item, and maybe this is more of like a kind of like a fun item, let's say, or something for like a speed farming build or like a Helltide build or something like that, where you wouldn't really care too much about every single arrow hitting because you have enough damage, fine, right? So that works. But on the other hand, I think the item is also just kind of weak. So having like a 40% chance to deal double damage is essentially equal to like, let's say, an Edge Master's aspect on your bow. This is also 40% extra damage. Dealing double damage doesn't really have any specific upside in Diablo 4 like it does in, for example, Path of Exile, where when you deal like a higher hit, then you, for example, inflict a bigger ailment, like a bigger shock or something like that. So this doesn't actually work that way in Diablo 4. There is not really any reason to deal double damage compared to just, straight up 40% more damage on every hit, for example. So there's not any synergy that goes with that. Maybe there's something coming, I don't know. There could be like some kind of like synergy that opens up with this in the future for, having this occasional really big hit compared to just, an average amount of you know, like, average like damage number basically. But even so, 40% chance to deal double damage is not even such a strong buff, really. Edge Masters is actually one of the kind of at least regular weaker aspects, I guess. We usually have aspects that are even stronger than that. In particular, skill-specific aspects are much stronger than that you might want to put on the bow, for example, to get the double effect from the aspects there. And in general, the stats on it are also not really great. I mean, yeah, Malice is a good passive, but it's nothing extraordinary. Just a really good, like, for example, crit roll could make up for that already by, you know, just scaling your precision and your damage. And it doesn't have life like a typical bow. Rogues kind of want the life on their weapons, for example. And it's also lacking some of the good tempering stats that we have. For example, on the bow, you can actually put chance to cast Barrage twice, and you can get a lot of it. Like, you can get like 60 or 70% chance to cast twice if you really want to, if you masterwork it up a little bit. And that stat alone is already worth more than basically the entire Windforce, I gotta say. So I'm not really sure where this is supposed to really fit in, because Blizzard has said that they are planning to rework every single unique item in the game for Season 5 to make them more desirable, make them, you know, fit in more with the current meta and the you know, much stronger legendary items that we have these days. They want to put, for example, some of the tempered stats also on uniques, meaning we don't temper the uniques, but we get stuff like, for example, chance to cast twice on the bow. But they have reworked Windforce now, and it has nothing of that sort. It is just like a barrage weapon, which is, well, the worst skill to really synergize with it, to be real. And it doesn't really have any powerful stats either, so it basically just makes your build worse. I would even run a yellow bow with no aspect, just tempered basically, over Windforce at this point, I gotta say. So at the very least, I think this item needs a pretty major buff, and on top of it, I think also it should not just be so restricted to Barrage. I kind of fear that they might actually listen to what I'm saying now and then mega buff Windforce and make it super powerful. You know, maybe give it like triple damage on the proc and maybe buff the stats or whatever, right? So something like that might happen, and eventually we're going to be forced to run this item on Barrage, and that is really the worst case scenario. Because, well, I can repeat it again, I do not want knockback on my Barrage build. Like, I do not, basically. I think this will make a bit more sense with something like Pinshot or so. But Pinshot already has its own bow, I guess, so why would you have a second bow for the same skill, unless it really like changes how the build plays? I think it's okay to have multiple uniques for the same slot, for the same skill, like, for example, Eaglehorn and Windforce both working for Pinshot. And that would be okay if they actually open up different playstyles and different builds, or have a bit of a different purpose, for example. But right now, Eaglehorn is also terribly weak, and so is Windforce. And even if Windforce was available for Pinshot, you would not use it. You would not use it under any circumstances over a normal bow for any of the range skills, basically. And then we have, for example, Rapid Fire that has recently been basically redesigned with the Skarner's Kiss Ring to now be like this artillery strike, like lobbing the explosives kind of effect. And this is also like a build where you don't really want to like knock enemies away from where they are. So it's like none of the three core skills that could work with the Windforce really have any real synergy with its effect. You don't want to knock back enemies. Yeah, okay, we have like a passive for that, for example, to knock back or knock down enemies, a concussive passive, but that is also getting changed. It now actually doesn't do that anymore. So it's also like, we don't even have any rogue synergies really with that effect anymore. So why do we have the Windforce doing that thing? Basically, all three of the range core skills on the rogue want to group up enemies as much as possible, or at least be close to the enemies themselves, because either you have the AoE effect on Rapid Fire, you have the Pinshot that shoots in one line, and occasionally, for example, if the knockback worked with Pinshot, then you would maybe knock them out of the line, basically, like a little bit to the side or something when you shoot through a pack, and then you can't actually hit them all anymore. And on top of this, you have, for example, the trick shot aspect for Pinshot, where you actually want to have enemies stacked as much as possible so that the side arrows hit them. And then you have Barrage, and Barrage, yeah, the knockback, I don't know, it just feels like there needs to be something else here, something more special, not just the knockback and the knockdown. I have not really identified which one of them occurs more often, or if they have the same chance. So there is also a knockdown in this item now that is not just a knockback, but I definitely noticed, and I was annoyed by this knockback, that it was really messing things up more than was helping me, on top of it just being weak. So that's kind of my feedback here. I'm not sure what Blizzard can really do with the item. If you have any cool ideas, I really like Windforce, and I kind of like the idea that it has some kind of special effect attached to this fantasy of, you know, knockback, or, you know, this, it also has this impetus passive, for example. So maybe they could like go a little bit, you know, dive into that fantasy and make it more of like an agile, you know, fly around the battlefield basically kind of effect, where you want to go really fast and maybe shoot from different angles. I don't know, but that could be maybe a bit more interesting compared to just a plain knockback that, I don't know, no one really wants, I think. So this is what I have to share here about this item. So there needs definitely be some update to this if you ever want to use a Windforce. So for anyone asking, you can link to that video, and I will gladly explain again on stream how bad the item is and how bad it remains with this new update. This is what I have to share here. Let me know what you think. Let me know any kind of ideas that maybe you can pass on as feedback. Otherwise, hope you enjoyed this little video here. Stay tuned for more from the PTR, and see you guys next time.